Mr. Positive, back with us on set. That's Owen Fairclough. Markets, they're really taking the France downgrade on the chin. You got some bullish numbers.
Well, I probably don't give President Sarkozy enough credit, Stuart. It's fair to say I'm pretty critical of this chap, but he called it right, at least in the short term. He said that French downgrade wouldn't be catastrophic. Well, it hasn't been. We're seeing, as you say, a real rally, particularly on the Asian markets, the European markets as well, at the opening bell, looking pretty good. There's some good results from companies like Burberry, for example, reporting very good Christmas sales in line with many other UK retailers. You can see there, those aren't really the kind of numbers you'd associate with a country that's just lost its AAA credit rating. The Asian markets as well, a very, very good day's trade. Just look at the Shanghai Composite, finishing the day more than 4% up. Who says that the Chinese economy is about to go pop? Yes, we've seen GDP growth there slowing down for the fourth quarter, but still nearly 9%. Imagine that in any Eurozone economy right now. The Nikkei as well, a little bit more modest, but the Hang Seng finishing the day 3% in the green as well. Well, you'll have to remind me of this conversation, perhaps, the closer we get to that EU summit, and of course, Greece potentially defaulting on 14 billion euros of debt. So we'll save this one.
Come back to it.
We'll wheel it out in a couple of months. Let's stay with the markets at least. As I say, a good opening, some good opening numbers on the European markets. Let's talk to Will Hedden. He's a sales trader at IG Markets. He joins us on the line now from London. Good morning to you, Will. Some really good numbers there that have perhaps surprised one or two people where you are. Let's just leave that alone for the time being, though, because we need to look at these downgrades. First, France, and then yesterday, of course, again from Standard & Poor's, a downgrade of the European Financial Stability Facility. It seems to be a fair assumption that this fund losing its AAA rating means it's much less attractive for investors, maybe from China. Is that something you'd agree with?
Yes, hi, good morning. Well, like you say, we've had not a too bad a reaction this morning and yesterday as well. With regards to the EFSF, I think that you're probably hitting the nail on the head there in that it does look like it will be less attractive to investors, especially if they're coming in from outside the Eurozone. We have muted in the past the possibility of someone like China coming in and putting funds into the Eurozone. I think what we'll know a little bit more after today, that there's supposed to be an auction today, I believe, of a fairly small auction for the EFSF, but an auction nonetheless to help pay for Ireland and Portuguese bailouts. So I think we'll get a bit more of a picture later on today. But so far, it doesn't seem like this downgrade has had too big an effect on the market stability. We haven't seen huge movements in most of the markets that are focusing on this.
Well, Italy, let's look at a couple of other countries. They're asking for a relaxation of its borrowing cost to grow. Greece, they're trying to flag up growth plans. What do you think the markets prioritise? Is it austerity to get those deficits down, or growth, which needs some spending, of course?
Well, actually, I think in the short term, the markets are pricing or looking for stability, and that's something we've reiterated throughout this whole Eurozone crisis. We've seen that's helped the markets over the last few weeks. Certainly since the turn of the year, we've had much more stable trading, despite the fact that we've had, say, these downgrades. You know, we've had a lot of rumour over the last few weeks and months that things like the French downgrade would happen, and then when they have actually happened, a lot of the movement's already been priced in, and we've seen that. So I think the fact that where we are now, we kind of have a little bit of a roadmap ahead. We know that Greece and Italy are going to struggle and are still a long way from implementing austerity measures, but we kind of know the roadmap for the next few months in terms of what we have coming up, and the fact that a fair amount of people have already kind of written Greece off, and the fact that we've only just had a new government installed in Italy means that there may be a bit more time required before we see progress there.
Will, just one last question for you. You mentioned there many people have written Greece off. S&P think that Greece will now default, potentially in weeks. Is that something you think the markets are pricing in already? Is that something that you agree with?
Yeah, I do, and I also think this is pretty much largely priced in. I think, you know, we were talking before that quite a few people, and very few people outside of, say, the Eurozone and the ECB would be thinking that Greece would avoid some kind of default. We really think that will probably happen at some point in the next 6 to 9 months, and I would have thought most market analysts would be having the same opinion, but it doesn't seem to be the sort of problem that we perhaps would have muted it would have been some months ago, and that you can see that in the way that even the euro is still quite a bit stronger than it has been over the history of the single currency. And so Greece being such a small part of the eurozone, I think that the euro can survive without Greece going forward.
Okay, well, good to talk to you. Many thanks, Will Hedden there from IG Markets. Just to pick up on what Will was saying, the EFSF is indeed selling off 6-month paper, around 1.5 billion euros of that a little later today. Not a huge amount of money, Stuart, but certainly significant. Given that downgrade now, investors will be looking to see what kind of rates they end up paying, what sort of yield those bonds get.
Sure. Okay, well, once you've lost a credit rating, the next question for you is how on earth do you get it back? And how long is it going to take? Well, there are plenty of examples of countries who've suffered a downgrade like France. Canada, they're among them.
In the AAA club, one country has managed to lose and then regain its top-tier ranking. Canada, a country rich in natural resources. In 1992, the country's deficit was 9% of GDP. Its AAA status was taken away, and it was written off by its nearest neighbor, the United States. At the time, the Wall Street Journal asked whether Canada was heading for bankruptcy.
The lesson is it's easy to lose the AAA status, and it takes a long time to win it back.
10 years. That's how long it took for Canada to regain the trust of the global markets. It was Canadian Prime Minister Jean Chrétien who guided the country through tough austerity measures. The Prime Minister cut civil servants' salaries by 20% and reduced ministry budgets by 15%. During his term, unemployment benefits were cut and politicians' salaries frozen.
I was called the Chevy Prime Minister, which is a modest car. Meanwhile, we had big Cadillacs in the garage, and they stayed there for 10 years. I never got to use them, which I regret a little bit.
The country's debt steadily decreased over the next decade. In 2002, its AAA credit rating was restored. The country, once written off by its neighbor, the U.S., weathered the 2008 financial upheaval in good shape, skirting the worst of the subprime mortgage crisis, making confidence in Canada grow.
Canada's secret for growth there now, a new milestone in China's seemingly unstoppable economic miracle. For the first time in its history, the urban population has overtaken the number of country dwellers. And with a country that has nearly double-digit growth, as we mentioned earlier, it raises fresh questions about how the world's second biggest economy can continue that expansion and feed a rapidly growing urban population. A little earlier, we talked to our correspondent in Beijing, Shannon Van Sant.
Basically, you're just seeing an entire shift. It's the largest mass migration in world history of rural laborers to China's cities. And that shift is going to help China make a crucial shift it has to make at some point in its economy, which is a shift from manufacturing to consumption. That shift is not going to be easy for the economy to make. Chinese government leaders are going to have to walk a real tightrope between stimulus measures and also efforts to boost spending and consumption. So I think how China responds fiscally and in terms of its government policy is just going to be really important.
Shannon Van Sant in Beijing, that absolutely fascinating story with China. I mean, we are seeing literally history unfolding in front of our eyes there, Stuart. And exactly as Shannon was saying, how this country now moves from a country that was predominantly rural, even 20 years ago, to a country that's now got these rapidly expanding cities is going to be their major challenge. And all the time we talk about this economy, can it sustain that kind of growth where we're seeing, say, nearly 9% growth over the last quarter?
If you thought the last few years have been dramatic financially, it's going to continue. Owen, thanks very much. Owen Fairclough, our business editor on France 24. Claire's here really shortly. Stay with us if you can.